ensure there are no problems with Mob Pyro and Death Row Records. And this took a rivalry between Mob Pyro and Southside Compton Crips and escalated it. And those tensions boiled over in the Lakewood Mall in the summer of 1996. There, you'll hear that Trayvon Lane, a member of the Mob Pyro associated with Death Row Records, was there with other members of Mob Pyro in order to do some shopping. Lakewood Mall was a mall nearby Compton. You'll also hear that baby Lane Anderson, Orlando Anderson, the defendant's nephew, was there. Now, Trayvon Lane that day was wearing a chain with a Death Row medallion. And there was a fight that occurs between the Mob Pyro group and the Southside Compton Crips. And at one point, that chain is pulled off Trayvon Lane's neck. Now, what happened to that chain is an issue of much dispute. Not everybody agreed. But the act of disrespect of pulling the Death Row chain and the brawl that occurs further escalates this heated rivalry. And what you'll learn is that these two men, Trayvon Lane and Orlando Baby Lane Anderson, they encounter each other again, this time in Las Vegas. So that brings us back up to September 7th, 1996, here in Las Vegas. Again, Mike Tyson is fighting Bruce Seldon. He disposes of him in less than in a round. Doesn't take a full round. And then after the fight, Tupac Shakur, Suge Knight, and the people that are here with, they leave. And among his group is Trayvon Lane. And that is why this fight occurs. Trayvon Lane and the Death Row group sees Orlando Anderson standing by himself, and they decide to attack him in retribution for what happened at the Lakewood Mall. You'll see Orlando Anderson's on the bottom of that group. You see security coming, trying to break this up. And then you'll see Tupac Shakur, Suge Knight, Trayvon Lane, and that group exit the MJ Grand. Now, Orlando Anderson was by himself because when Dwayne Davis purchased the tickets for the Bruce Seldon fight, he got it through a scalper. So everybody that came with Dwayne Davis were seated separately throughout the fight. And so Orlando Anderson was at that time by himself. You'll see that Mr. Shakur, Mr. Knight, and his group leave the MGM Grand. And you'll see that Orlando Anderson, after being held by security, is questioned for a minute, asked if he wants to press charges. He decides he doesn't want to participate in any type of prosecution and that he doesn't need medical attention. Dwayne Davis hears about this beating. And what you will hear is that in his world, there is no question that a response is required. And you will hear from Dwayne Davis what happens next. Because what happened over the next 2.5 hours is something Dwayne Davis would later describe himself in the secret 2008 interview from his attorney's office with the federal task force. And we'll talk about that interview and the circumstances surrounding that later. But we'll hear about what the next 2.5 hours was. So, what we learn is that Dwayne Davis is upset about the beating of his nephew. And frankly, that's not an unusual response. What's unusual is the next steps Dwayne Davis takes. Unusual for the normal person, maybe not unusual for in gang culture.
So right there, hello. Why can't I get it? It's just me against the world. It's just me against the world. I got nothing to do. Well, I got nothing to lose. It's just me against the world. So he's laying out, painting the picture for the jury that Dwayne, in his world, that there had to be some action behind what happened to his nephew. And so he's laying out that picture of the type of person and how such a person responds or reacts to something like that in his world, other than how a normal person would react, despite a normal person would also being upset if someone attacks or beats up their nephew, right? And then he goes into the audios and the interviews regarding Dwayne and allegedly uh, confessing and commenting on his role or part in the shooting of Tupac. And so the defense is going to have to counter these arguments and the picture that he's painting of the individual that Dwayne was uh, during that time and even now, you know.
Dwayne Davis decides he is going to organize a retaliation, that this beating cannot go unanswered.
So he's saying that Dwayne is going to organize because he has to respond in the world where he's from and the lifestyle basically that he's living at that time. He has to respond. And so he orchestrates a response and he's going to lay out the groundwork, painting this imagery for the jury to decide and to make up their minds on whether this man was involved or on what level and what role did he play, if so.
And he runs into a person named Zip Martin. Remember the Zip Martin? That was a connection with Bad Boy Entertainment from New York. And Zip Martin tells him that he has a gun and that he can come help him out. Hey, where do you go to? What he tells it, right? He tells it, hey, we're going to go handle this shit or whatever. Yeah, yeah. How long was the time? No, you don't know, it was, you're going to get 6 stupid. Who said that? Everybody. Everybody. Yeah, everybody. You know, how do you know that's this girl? She told you it was in a lot. Yeah, it was a lot. Yeah. Did you ask her? Do you have one, or is it told you? Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to ask you these. No, I was going to do. Yeah, it's cool. What are you? Yeah. So later, Dwayne Davis organizes 2 vehicles to go over to the 662 Club. Before that, he gets the gun from Zip Martin. He goes out to his Mercedes Benz, gets the gun from Zip Martin, and then after some time, he assembles 2 cars to go to 662 to violently confront Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight for the beating of his nephew. And you'll hear that Dwayne Davis wasn't initially in the white Cadillac. He goes into a van, and Orlando B. Dwayne Anderson, they go in a white Cadillac, and they go to Club 662, waiting for Tupac Shakur, waiting for Suge Knight, waiting for this violent confrontation. And what you'll learn is that Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight don't show up while they're there. Oh, yeah. Out to 626, they didn't show up. We waited about 15, 20 minutes, they didn't show up. So, if I can show you some liquor, stop in the liquor store, I got on the hand, yeah, jump in the cab. So what you hear Dwayne Davis say is he got out of the van and goes into the Cadillac.
So he's laying a pretty good groundwork of what happened that night and Dwayne's character and involvement, and he's interpreting or adding to the story whatever missing pieces there are, but interpreting the audio of Dwayne and also other evidences that are available concerning the trial. You're gonna hear the street that it took place on, describe the car, and also saying that he wasn't in that white vehicle initially. He was in another vehicle. And so he's putting these pieces together and laying out a pretty good uh, layout for from his vantage point, Dwayne's involvement in the shooting and murder of Tupac, and looking forward to see what the defense will say in regards to these allegations and how they will counter these arguments. So the jury may have plausible doubt uh, or have doubt and see any flaws in the argument and how consistent the argument is. So they're gonna have to do a really pretty good job with countering whether he was present and where he was, if not, so that the arguments being presented here can be seen as flawed in terms of the timeline.
And the plan at that point is to go to a liquor store, get some booze, and then go back to the Las Vegas Strip and party. What the original intention was before Orlando Anderson was beaten at the MGM Grand. But on the way back to the Las Vegas Strip, they see a caravan of cars. And that caravan included Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight. And in that white Cadillac, before the shooting occurs, Dwayne Davis explained.
Could he just like place anyone and say, "Hey, this was the person. They did this. This is how they were involved and contributed to the shooting and murder of Tupac," and place the evidence and you know, well, place the individual among the evidence and utilize them in their, I would say, associations and make them be an accessory or involved directly. However, is that possible? Could that be done here? And why Dwayne?
So the driver is Terrence T. Brown. In the rear driver's side is DeAndre Dre or Big Dre Smith. In the rear passenger side is Orlando Baby Lane Anderson. And Dwayne Davis himself, DVD, is in the front passenger side. And this is how Dwayne Davis explains the murder of Tupac Shakur.
Yeah. There's a little story right there that he came up armed at the Long Lane Boulevard. And shit. Every day he come in that BMW with Jimmy Carter. Tupac! Tupac! I was like, there you go. Yeah, the U-turn was what called maybe just on the U-turn. It was in a little lane. We just pulled up on the side, checked every car, see where they was.
So what directed your attention to him was some girl shouting at Tupac?
Tupac! He gave his son away. Otherwise, they would go away. He all ran out of the way. You know how they do.
And then you turns and then you pull alongside of it. You got it in the car. But you already had the gun in the corner. At what point you had to gun?
I thought they were going to pull on my side. You know, that's one of them going to the out, man. You know, he pulled on their side.
So you were getting blacks to do that too, or you were just...
Yeah, we would have been on my side.
Okay. So you handed the gun to the backseat.
Yeah.
You can hear me.
Yeah.
Now, if that's his official voice on that recording describing the night of the events, some females talking to Tupac, and he said he gave himself away. He gave himself away, and so it's coming from the perspective of an attacker to say, "Hey, you gave yourself away when you did that. Uh, you made yourself accessible to me, and you did that. If it was on my side, then." Yeah, the guy asked if so. Would you have blast? Would you have blast if he was? Yeah, if it was on my side, I would have blast. So it's hard. So the audio is placing himself there at the crime scene and at the event of on the night of the shooting, and yeah, if he was on my side, I would have blast. So it's gonna be hard for the defense to say, "Hey, he was lying. He was gonna come out with a book. He thought it was past who could not be, held accountable if he told that story and placed himself in the story because he wanted to sell a book or was looking to get a book deal and etc etc, and he was just fabricating these lies regarding himself just to make himself be that person in the story so he can sell books or whatever else, or saying he must have been mentally ill at that point. I don't know what they're gonna do, but they're gonna have to do something regarding this audio.
So what you hear Dwayne Davis say, admit that as they see Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight driving to Club 662, Dwayne Davis, along with Terrence Brown, DeAndre Smith, and Orlando Anderson, decide to make a U-turn, confront Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight. Dwayne Davis has the firearm. It's a firearm he got from Eric Vonzet Martin, and then he passes it to the back. Dwayne Davis says that if they were on his side, if Tupac Shakur and Suge Knight were on his side of the vehicle, he would have shot them himself. But because they were on the other
That's
side,
gonna be hard
he handed it
to
to DeAndre
counter.
Smith. DeAndre Smith, according to Dwayne Davis, did not want to shoot at that time, so Orlando Anderson shot into that car. Dwayne Davis explains this over and over again.
Literally, come on the street.
Hey, when he starts blasting, you say he should look over, he sees you. He looks right at you. Are you together?
I just know he does something somebody real.
When he looks over at you, and then, Tupac's did get the shot, and then the story is Tupac's trying to either get out of
Man, she was something.
what do you see happening inside that?
I see the bullet going to shoot again. I thought he was dead. I thought he was dead. He was crazy or something.
He's blasting into his neck right here.
Yeah, it's gonna be pretty tough. I seen the bullet graze Suge head. I thought he was dead. Something of the sort. So that kind of information, I don't know. It's gonna be tough. Let's see what the opening statements of the defense.
That microphone was buried and dug up 30 years from now, would it still be a microphone? The answer is yes. And the reason why that's important is because in this case, what they are telling you, they're representing it to be a fact when it really is fiction. And it's up to you to determine what the facts are in this case. Now, I'm going to give you a timeline here for you to understand just a little bit of how this is going to work.
The defense is going with facts over fiction. He's gonna paint what was presented as being fictitious, or at least try to get the jury to think about it whenever the incidences or the information surrounding the incidents is presented, and painting Dwayne as the cause, an organizer, that they can think about it from the perspective of it being fictitious and not really facts. Let's continue to hear.
Because there's so much evidence in this case that we have to sort of compartmentalize some things. And what I've done is really just sort of focused on the three detectives that work this file from beginning to now. First detective you will hear about is Detective Becker. He works the file, he's the original detective on the scene. Detective Long takes over the case for about 15 years or so, and then it ends with Detective Mogg, who presents this to the grand jury in 2023. But why this timeline is relevant is you have to see the span of time for yourself. 30 years. And so this, what facts do they have after 30 years? Now, Detective Becker does what every homicide detective does when he arrives on scene. He's assigned to the case. He starts his investigation. At that particular time, though, Tupac Shakur was not dead. He was critically injured. He was at UMC. And it isn't until 6 days later that he passes away. But Detective Becker starts his initial investigation because it's pretty serious. And as a result, he just takes over the investigation. What he will testify to is that illegal pull on a Saturday night in the middle of a fight between Mike Tyson and Bruce Seldon, it was very busy when he arrived. And he had arrived at a time where he was able to determine cartridge casings, 40 caliber, that was found at the scene. That's another fact for you. But at some point they he learns that potentially it was a Glock 40, the actual firearm that he used at the scene. And then when crime scene analysts arrive on scene, they document the evidence. And they document the cars.
Mm-hmm.
That will be important. You'll determine at some point why the cars are documented. And with regard to Detective Becker, what he'll tell you is police officers write reports. Critical. Hugely important. Why? Because at some point in the future, like in this case, 30 years later, Detective Becker will not remember details like he would if he had his report in his record. And that's going to be important for you to consider in this case. Now, what Detective Becker does, though, is because of the outcry, the attention, the media focus on this case, he took his file and he secured it in his office under lock and key. Because he was worried about leaks in Metro, leaking information out to the public, because so many people wanted to know answers to the question as to what happened and who did this to Tupac Shakur. Now, what you're going to find is, when Detective Becker testifies in this case, that a lot of those reports are now missing. They're gone. Which is Metro's responsibility to hold and to pass on to the next detective, and then finally to the next detective. Now, Detective Becker also did not trust Compton PD. Why is that important in this case? Because there's an individual by the name of Reggie Wright Sr. He was a lieutenant working in Compton in charge of the gangs in Compton in terms of investigations. His son is Reggie Wright Jr. He was the head of security for Death Row Records, the same security that was here in Las Vegas on the 9th of September 7th, 1996. Death Row Records was affiliated with Mob Pyru Blood, and detectives Ladd and Brennan from Compton answered directly to Reggie Wright Sr. Becker did not trust Compton PD. And the one thing that he really didn't trust is that most of their information came from confidential informants that were not reliable. And he'll tell you that. And because of his intuition, Compton PD was shut down in September of 2000 due to internal corruption. They just evaporated that police department, and the sheriff's department for LA County absorbed the responsibilities for the police department in Compton because of the corruption that was there. Now, what facts, right? Just like the pads of paper that you have in your hand and the pens that you have in your hand, what facts can we determine from Detective Becker's efforts? First and foremost, we know that Tupac was shot multiple times. That's a fact. That can be proven. We know that it was with a 40 caliber firearm. That's a fact, due to the cartridge casings. On the corner of Flamingo and Opal. That's also a fact. Right? We're on board so far? We know the date, September 7th, 1996. That is a fact. At 11:17 p.m., we know that to be a fact as well. And then finally, that he was in a vehicle during the electric night, and that Tupac died 6 days later. Those are facts that will not be reviewed by anybody in this courtroom during the time we spend together. But here's the one thing. There are no facts to point to Kipi. Not one. You're going to hear about this over and over and over again. No facts like the microphone in your hand or the pad of paper that you have that you write on. Detective Long takes over the case in 2002, and he has it from 2002 to 2017. He was, interestingly enough, on the gang unit, and at the time of the shooting, he was in the gangs, and he had been one of the first to arrive on scene. He will testify and tell you that every time he did something on this file, he would go to report. Because that's important. That's what you do as a police officer. And he conducted follow-up interviews, and he made some travel to Compton. He will tell you those things. That's his role in all of this. But here's the thing. Detective Long also encountered some challenges in this case. They had to hide the case file with Metro because people were still accessing the file in Metro, and they weren't authorized to do so.
So the defense is going on, and he's presenting his case as to why Dwayne's innocence, and he's presenting facts versus fiction. Facts are what we know. Suge Knight was driving the car that Tupac got shot in. Tupac died 6 years later. The street that he was shot on, and type of weapon that was used. And then he's, letting the Jew, hey, these are the facts that you know. The other stuff are fabricated. And it goes on painting the picture and laying out the groundwork that the department was compromised in a sense, wasn't trustworthy, dealing with informants and so forth, and people bringing, unauthorized people with due to unauthorized Metro access in on a false case, and the case files being hidden, and department being shut down and so forth. So with that department being shutting down, so many years have passed, and in between multiple detectives taking on the case, you can't trust the information that is being presented because several detectives have taken on the case. It has been so many years, untrustworthy with the amount of people that are associated with the case, informants, so on and so forth, and unauthorized access to the files, and people desiring and wanting access to the files, so on and so forth. So he's laying out that groundwork. It's going to be interesting to see how he responds to the audio. And yeah.
The case number so that people couldn't find the file. In addition to that, what you're going to learn is LAPD reached out to him, called him up and said, hey, Detective Long, we have the gun. And we tested it, and it matches back to what you're looking for in terms of the weapon that killed Tupac Shakur. Detective Long goes to LAPD.
So the LAPD, gave him a fake gun. Regarding the case.
Puts it back, gets it tested, and it comes out as not a match. LAPD tells him after, he gave you a fake gun.
We're testing you, yeah?
This is the level of, I don't know how to put it, that was going on during this time period between Metro, LAPD, and Compton. This is what's happening.
So we can't trust the evidence.
These, according to Detective Long, became very scarce and stale, meaning that it was just taking a long time for him to follow with people. Witnesses became unavailable. Why do you think that is? Because of time. So as a result, memories started failing because of that time. So Detective Long had these challenges. But here's what Detective Long does. He interviews Keithy in 2009. Sits him down, has an interview with Keithy, just like the state said. And guess